right, welcome to the Learner Center Collaborative Podcast. I am your host, Katie Martin, and my guest today is Tina Meglich, principal of Conway Elementary School in Escondido Union School District. I am so excited to hear about Tina's journey and more about Conway. So welcome to the podcast, Tina.
Thank you, Katie. I'm really happy to be here.
Great. So let's kick it off with a question to get a little bit more insight into who you are. What are some of the key experiences that have shaped who you are as a leader today?
The choice to go into education was one that I think I made when I was very young in my own neighborhood teaching school. But I actually think one of the biggest influences was actually middle school, and it wasn't a positive experience. And that was one of the reasons why I actually ended up at the middle level for so many years. In particular, it was a math class, and that entire year was the most painful year in math for me ever, with just a lot of comments that really made it feel like I was never going to be good at math. Having a dad who had no voice, and I was his oldest, always believed that I was really good in math. As an engineer too, he very much pushed his three girls. And so little by little, it just, it started to come. But that experience to this very day has stuck with me. And because of that, never wanted any other student to have that experience, especially during their junior high or middle school years, when those years are tough enough for our students, that I felt that was where I needed to be. And then that led me to, pursuing an educational degree and whatnot. Was a started off as a high school teacher and absolutely love that. But then I was really drawn to those middle schoolers and ended up at middle school here in Escondido for about 10 years. During that time, taught 6th, 7th, and 8th. Love my students, love that age group. And I know that there are a few of us that absolutely love that age group.
I'm with you.
All their, right, the emotions that go with those times, the confusion, but also the learning, because some incredible innovation comes during that time because students are really trying to figure out who they are, some of those ideas, because they're still not, they're still not fully developed, but they have some of those very, very creative ideas that you can really, really ignite during those times and really connect with kids when they really need strong folks that can really support them and build those relationships with them. So I love being a teacher. I approach everything I do as a teacher first. From that experience, I ended up being an instructional coach for about 5 years, again, with a middle school focus, actually during the very challenging, exciting times of implementing Common Core. Mm-hmm. So during that time, it also challenged me to really think outside the box and how to really do this work that was meaningful, but also authentic, and being very vulnerable because I had no idea what I was doing as we were implementing Common Core, and being okay with that discomfort and allowing our teachers and educators during that time to feel the discomfort, because that was part of the learning that needed to happen. From that, went into admin. And that's been almost, 10 years also, because I've been here at Conway for 8 as a principal, but I was an assistant principal for 2 years at a middle school. And during those 2 years as a middle school assistant principal, I tried to make that the shortest part of my career because discipline is not my thing. Restorative practices 100% are, and giving kids that opportunity to learn from those mistakes was something that was very close to my heart. But really, for me, it's always been about curriculum instruction and those relationships with students, but also kind of drawing on our students' talents and the assets that they bring to inspire them to achieve more than they think possible. fortunately, I was at a middle school that had implemented project-based learning. And so that was also very close to my heart, because when things are cross-curricular, right, you can create and you can do such amazing work with students when they see those connections. And we're not teaching in isolation,
Right.
because everything is connected. That's how the world works.
It is.
And so that was a blessing.
I just see, like, I'm listening to you, I'm like, yes, yes, so many connections. And I think, as we were talking about before, being at the middle level program. So we found out that both of us started our teacher preparation at Cal State San Marcos middle level education program. And I have said many times that it was one of the best learning experiences of my life. It set the foundation because that program modeled interdisciplinary teaching and learning. We focused on students. We did authentic projects. We were in classrooms working with students, coming back and refining our lessons based on what we learned and testing out new ideas. And focusing on relationships. We talked about Janet and Lori and Erica, the professors. Like, they came in, they always focused on relationships, classrooms with, we had classroom jobs, and they modeled all the practices that I to this day still carry out. And so I'm listening to you hear about, and like how you're talking about those through lines that have also been part of your career. And it just makes me realize how important those preparation programs are, because so often we hear how bad teacher education is. And so I'm always such an advocate to highlight they don't have to be. And there are models out there that are really, really, and have been for many years, leading the way and supporting teachers. And I believe I've had a very successful career because I got off on the right foot with the foundations. And it sounds like you feel the same way based on your preparation and the through line. You knew the kids, you knew what to prepare, and you felt successful in the middle because of it.
Absolutely. Everything that you just said, I absolutely connected with. And also, just, I hadn't really thought about it, that interdisciplinary teaching and what we learned, because that did set the foundation, is honestly what I have always felt is the right way to approach teaching.
Yep.
It's the right way to prepare our students for the future in whatever job that they may land, because of all those interdisciplinary connections. It also makes it meaningful for the students, and they understand the why behind, oh, why do I have to learn this math concept?
Right.
Why do I have to write this way? Well, because we have to communicate. Why do we have to collaborate in a group as we're grappling with ideas? That's what we do when we go into the real world. And what a better way to approach teaching of our next generation, by doing it in the schools rather than doing it in isolated classrooms and in isolated contents. But it does go all back to that middle level program, which I'm so grateful that that's the path I took. And that path I took because it circles back to that story I told you about my own middle school experience,
Yep.
where I never wanted any student to feel that feeling of I'm inadequate, I can't do this, I'm never going to be good at math. Well, it wasn't just about the math, it was about everything else and all those different areas and all those connections, which now as an elementary principal, oh my gosh, you need it all of those skills.
Right.
And
Well, it's
so
like you said, you got to teach high school. And so, middle school philosophy, I have come to believe is really just good foundations for teaching and learning across the whole K-12 continuum, and applies to our adult learners as well. If we really think about interdisciplinary relationships, application to the real world, a community that honors and values the strengths of each other, all of those things, you're right, are so ingrained and so applicable across all of the grade levels.
you just said something that really just kind of sparked when you said a community that honors all that is exactly what I feel that we've been building here at Conway with it is project-based learning, but specifically it's expeditionary learning, which that is the foundation. The foundation is we're a community of learners that work together. Everything is interdisciplinary. All of their expeditions have some type of real world connection. Every single expedition is interdisciplinary. Every expedition has some kind of service component to it, and every expedition has an opportunity for our students to share their learning and showcase their learning to make a greater impact beyond the school itself. And I cannot believe I was so lucky to land here at Conway, because this is the type of work that we've been doing for the last 8 years. Our students are thriving, but it's not just our students, our teachers are thriving too, because it's all about tapping into their own talents and the assets that they bring, and how do you grow those so that everyone is shining, not just our students, but our staff as well.
I can attest to that. So people listening might be thinking, oh, yeah, we do that too. Conway is an extremely special place for many of the reasons you just shared, but your longevity as a leader, the systems you've been able to put in place. But 8 years ago, when you landed at Conway, I'm assuming it looked a little bit different than it does today in 2023. So I'd love for you to kind of unpack a little bit of the journey. What are the things that you've done as a community to get to this place where you have authentic projects, you have a community that's working together, you have young people leading tours and talking about their work that they're doing and why it matters to them and others? Take us through a little bit of how you got there.
Sure. First, if you would have asked me when I first started my career, would I ever land at an elementary school? And I would have said absolutely not, because the truth be told, I was scared to death of the littles, scared to death to go into any primary classroom. And so I wasn't sure. But what I was sure about is when I landed here at Conway, I knew that they had started this journey. They were actually 1 year into expeditionary learning, so I cannot take credit for bringing this model to Conway. The previous principal had been exploring different educational models, and so she landed on expeditionary learning. She started that work with the staff as far as this is what we're going to be doing, and embarking on this journey. And the staff was really fired up about it. And then she moved on. So when I arrived with absolutely no elementary experience whatsoever. So the first thing I did have to learn is how to recalibrate my own leadership style, because elementary sites are very different than a middle school site. That was the first lesson when people started crying when I would approach them. So that was something I had to learn about myself.
And not the students, the adults, right?
It was the adults. You're absolutely right. So I had to recalibrate. That was my first lesson. But I did read about expeditionary learning, and I had no idea I'd never heard of it before. I've heard of a lot of different educational models. I was familiar with project-based learning because my previous site had been really kind of engaging in some project-based learning. But when I read their core practice book, that was the one piece that I was blown away by. Oh my gosh, this is everything I believe in, which a lot of it was established, and that foundation was set through the middle level program because it was all interdisciplinary. But it also took it to a different level. The foundation of CREW, which is relational character building, and now that becomes such a crucial piece of a site, was part of the model. And there was another component, part of the model, that really spoke to me, and that is the dimension that we refer to as high quality work, which high quality work you cannot get to without that constant ongoing iteration process, the ongoing feedback that happens not just from teacher to student, but that feedback that happens from peer to peer, and students being able to recognize, okay, there could be some improvement here, there could be some other improvement here. That process itself is how we refine our own work. That's how we promote that reflection and how we get better at whatever it is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first came to Conway, yes, the model had already, that foundation had been set as far as the staff really excited. the staff, truth be told, was really angry because all of a sudden their leader's gone and then this new person's coming in, and who's this person coming in? So I recognized a couple of things that year one. One, there was a lot of things that were happening here at the site. The first thing we had to do was establish our vision. There was no vision. And so together with the staff, we did come up with our vision, which is that all learners will discover their unlimited potential through excellence, perseverance, integrity, and compassion. That EPIC, that EPIC, lives throughout the entire school in many different forms. We also use that as the focus of our relational character development. And so we really named what that looked like as far as a scholar and as an active citizen in our classrooms. Year one, we had our motto, and our motto usually as an expeditionary learning school is we are crew, not passengers. And that's still part of who we are, but we actually added a second motto that year, and it was we had to simplify to unify. There were so many ideas that were happening. There were so many, different initiatives that had been started or spoken about, but it was too much. And if I learned anything from going through Cal State San Marcos was when I was in the leadership program, Dr. Harry Weinberg had said, go slow to go fast. And I knew that year we had to really hit the pause on a lot of different things that were happening at the site, because we had to first simplify to make sure that our staff crew was unified and moving forward with this vision. So year after year, we kept adding to what we call our action plan or our work plan. Year one was simplify to unify, really focus on what EPIC looks like and sounds like in every single one of our classrooms, as far as a scholar and as an active citizen. We really had to live what our vision was like, and we had to focus on relationships first, because if we didn't have that foundation of character development and the relationship, there was no way that we were going to do the hard work and the heavy lifting that we had to do. When I came to Conway that first year, we were the lowest performing school of the 24 schools in our district. Our math scores that year were at 8% proficiency. And I think language arts was something like 14%.
Can I ask what they are now?
We are sitting right around for both about 45%. For both.
And how does that compare to the district?
We're outperforming the district. So that feels pretty darn good. We're not done yet, and we're going to continue to grow. But the reality is, half of our students, 50% of our students, are language learners, are multilingual learners, and so that was something that I recognized we really had to focus on. And so from year one, part of our action plan really included that academic discourse across the entire school. So we actually created what we call these academic discourse mats that really focus on what does language look like in our classrooms. From that grew. The next year, we actually focused on what extended discourse is, because everyone can give our students sentence frames, right? And they can build on that. And if they see it, they're going to use it. But how are they really going to apply it to extend their thinking and their learning and be able to articulate that? And that's when our focus that next year actually changed to extended discourse. And we will really talk through, what does that look like for our students? How do they build on each other's ideas? How do they recognize, oh, that's a conversation cue, I can add to that? And so that's been a key component to the work that's happened here at Conway.
Yeah, and I want to just jump in and kind of emphasize that one of the things, you've mentioned a few core pieces that you've had, crew, the relationship building, the authentic learning, the academic discourse. So two things I noticed: there's structures in place that you've put in place that everyone understands, so that that model can exist for all students. It's not just dependent upon one classroom and one teacher and what they want to do, but there is a model across all classrooms that is interdependent, so that each and every student gets that experience. And the academic discourse and students taking ownership, I wasn't there, 9 years ago to see where it started, but I do know, walking through all of your classrooms today, the students are the ones doing the work. They're the ones having discussions. They're the ones who are engaging in work and collaborating with their peers. And teachers are pulling small groups, they're facilitating feedback discussions. But that shift from teachers doing the work and guiding and pulling all the students along the model to students really taking ownership is a key piece. And, as you talked about test scores being really low, something I've been constantly reflecting on is, as a language arts teacher myself in middle school, that was something we really struggled with, low literacy rates across the entire school. And as I became a coach, I noticed that the kids weren't doing the reading, right? So of course they weren't going to be able to perform or show how they could read and make informed, decisions or critically think about a passage, because they had spent all year just listening to someone else tell them what the answer was instead of wrestling with text and making meaning so they were comfortable doing it in another context. And that's what I had seen at Conway, is students being able to wrestle with information, text, talk to each other, make informed decisions, and actually apply what they're learning in authentic, meaningful contexts.
And that's exactly what you're supposed to see, Katie, when you walk through.
It is. I mean, and that's a piece, but I think that making that explicit to people who might be listening and thinking, I want to do that. And not being able to see how is that possible in my current context when kids, levels of literacy are so low, or their agency is so low, or motivation is low. You might have an educator or a principal listening saying, I'd love to do what Tina's doing at Conway. I just don't see the path to get there. Or I don't see, that's not possible in my context. And I think what you're highlighting is these structures, alignment can help get there. So I want to ask two more questions specifically. Crew, I think, is an important principle. Sometimes we call it advisory, different things. So can you talk about crew and how that really functions as a foundation of the school model?
So crew it's part of the expeditionary learning model, but it takes place actually multiple times. So it's not just during advisory. Every single classroom starts off in crew. Creating our master schedule, and when you say structures,
Yep.
absolutely includes crew. There is a built-in time every single day that starts the day with crew. Teachers will also pull crew, and they could be either a restorative circle, it could be a morning meeting structure. We do have a structure that we do follow for crew that starts off with a reading, greeting, initiative, and then a closing. So that model is in place for teachers to develop crew. We also spent a lot of time creating crew lessons around excellence, perseverance, integrity, and compassion. And we had a scope and sequence for the year as far as when these are going to be led in classrooms. Crew is a place where students can feel heard. It's a place where they can lead crew as well, especially in many of our older classes. Students are the ones that are leading those crew meetings. Crew also ends our days on Friday. It's our closing crew for the week, where students reflect on their goals that they have set for the week. This is where it is a beautiful thing. They give each other feedback. If they are rating themselves, so we have these structures in place from TK through third grade. They use a thumbometer, so a thumbs up, sideways thumb, or downwards. That's just a structure that we have in every single classroom. And so they will rate themselves on whatever those goals are. They're super transparent. They'll share what they are. But students will also hold each other accountable. And if someone's giving themselves, a thumbs up, they will say, well, remember when you didn't show compassion out on the playground the other day?
Love it.
And then they will reflect on, oh yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm here, but I did learn I should have done this. Same thing in our upper grades. We use a fist of five being they rocked it for the week. They are harder on themselves oftentimes, and they might rate themselves a 3 or a 4. And I have heard in these closing crew meetings where students will say, well, no, I think you actually were a 4 or a 5 because I remember when you did this, or remember how you persevered on that essay when we were in middle of writing our reflections for that's Esperanza Rising on one of their chapters, and they will share that with each other. And that is when it becomes really powerful. So yes, crew is a structure where we can run restorative circles. Sometimes it's a place for our students to be heard. They can lead crew. We use crew also if there's been a conflict out at recess time. A teacher will pull a crew meeting right after recess to kind of address whatever that is, because our teachers have learned if our students' brain isn't downshifted, right, from all the research that we've done, they're not going to be in a place to learn at that time.
I like how you just said the research. So, what you've done is you've created structures that align to the research around how we learn, the social emotional context, because we can say that all the time. We know kids need to reflect, we know they need to set goals, we know they need to have time to build community, they need to figure out how to deal with conflict. But so often it's not part of the schedule. It's, left up to individual teachers to, rush through the content to get to those pieces. So being intentional as a school leader and community and saying we value these things, they need to be part of our model to be successful. And it is not simply just a matter of getting through the curriculum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then putting a master schedule in place absolutely supports that. So when I often would hear, we just don't have time in the day. We don't have time to do that. What would that look like? I'm like, oh, I'm really good at schedules. I can figure that out. And so when we do that and when we respond to what we're hearing, and you put that structure in place, then everyone is doing it. So crew has been really the foundation. I also run my staff meetings in a crew. So we start in circle, we end in circle, and I don't ask our teachers to do anything in their classroom that I don't do with them. And that's been really important.
That was one of my big questions. So professional learning, right? We hear like staff meetings and all these ideas that, that staff meeting could have been an email. Like, give us an example of what are the structures in place for teachers to collaborate and learn, that really supports your model.
I do draw on my leadership team. So I do have 2 leadership teams here. And that happened, I would say, I think that was year 2 that I was here. We just had an ILT initially that really was charged with doing everything. But what I realized was that was too much for just one group. So I broke it up. We have an ILT that really is focused on curriculum assessment and instruction. That is where they live. And as we are responding to the needs of the site, we actually plan out almost our entire year of professional learning. That happens over the summer when we during our leadership retreat, where we look at what our site goals are for the year and plan that out. I do not lead it. I really lean on my teacher leaders, and we're really intentional as to when certain work has to happen. Early on, there was a lot of work where we were putting those cohesive structures in place, like learning targets were huge for us. How do we craft those learning targets? How do we create learning targets for scholarly and for the active citizen? Because those have to go hand in hand. We did a lot of that with the extended discourse work early on. How do we teach and how do we build teacher capacity around what does extended discourse really look like and sound like? It's not just having those sentence frames up. How do we know that students are truly building on each other's ideas? And how do we question to help them move along and move their thinking along? And then how do we teach our students to do that? So professional learning is not just me, it's our entire staff. Our second leadership team is called CLT, and CLT is charged with, the C is actually 3 C's. It's culture, climate, and character. So they really live under that work. Anything that has to do with the culture of the site, the character, the relational character development work, and then the climate of the site, that is where that work lives. We are a PBIS district, so they are also the PBIS team. And so they do all that work, but it is a different group of leaders. And what's interesting is those leaders are very different than my ILT leaders. And so, so that is something I've been able to leverage their strengths.
Right.
And what leadership team that they can sit on to really lead that work. So,
and they collaborate together, right? So the culture team is still leveraging what the ILT, the instructional leadership team, is working on. and vice versa. The instructional leadership team leverages the work of the culture team.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, but having our action plan complete at the beginning of the year and what those site goals are is how we kind of progress through the year. And we do pivot sometimes during the year when we see certain areas where we're like, ooh, we really need to do a little bit deeper work in this area. And that for us last year was questioning and really building capacity around teacher questioning to kind of move thinking along. So we had to add that. The other times that teachers have to collaborate, which happens, and it was created through, again, my middle school brain, because I came from middle school and working on middle school schedules, is I use my Title I funds to fund impact teachers here. And so that was something coming into the site where I was really looking at how are we going to really move the needle here? We need to be able to provide that time for our teachers to collaborate, to do the kind of work that I need them to do to make an impact. And so through site funding, I have a STEM teacher and I also have a full-time art teacher, but they're initially they were only 50% positions and that's all they did. Later on, they were turned into 100% positions because in the morning or part of their day, they're actually my intervention teachers and they've been trained in Orton Gillingham and so they support those intervention groups. So when the students are going to them, to these specials, which is art and STEM, and then we also have a library cell rotation in there that my school counselor will also lead. When the students are with them doing this amazing work, the teachers are coming together and collaborating. So they have an additional 60 minutes once a week, in addition to Thursday. So Thursdays, there's 60 minutes of collaboration time. And then it's our 75-minute staff meeting followed because we have an early release Thursday and we time bank on Thursday as well. So we were able to create these different times for our teachers to collaborate. Around that, we also created a structure as far as what their collaboration looks like. And so every team has a note catcher and a way to set their goals so that that time is really about the curriculum and instruction. That time is not about planning field work or we have, this event coming up. It's really about curriculum and instruction.
So if I'm hearing you, you have a clear school model that has not changed, right? You have your vision, you have your model, and yearly you set goals on what the next steps are. And then your ILT and CLT teacher leaders are part of co-constructing what learning looks like for the educators that year based on your goals and the collective needs. And then you've built in structures for the staff to come together during your staff meeting where they're discussing these goals, where they're led by teachers, and then you have collaboration with structure but autonomy for teachers to do what they need.
Yeah, you've got it. And
Sounds
there's one huge component there. Within that, how do we know that we're on the right track, and how do we know that that we're going in the right direction? Because you have to put in that progress monitoring.
It's like you have my questions in front of you. I didn't even give you my questions, but that's exactly what I was going to ask you. What does success look like? How do you measure success?
It is through that progress monitoring. So we do have those structures also built in place. I set goals with teachers around and their academic, but also character related goals and high quality work goals for us. So we can measure some of it with like with iReady testing. And so we do have goals set around that. We go through a data inquiry cycle or PDSAs is what we had been using in the past to progress monitor that. But I also involve my leadership team in learning walks. So they go on learning walks with me throughout the year. Actually, we have another one coming up, and they always have a guiding question that's attached to that. And we together as a leadership team come together and we choose the indicators. These are the indicators that we're going to measure this year. year, we have baseline data, and they're always stressed about that first learning walk for the year because, I let them know this is our baseline data, guys. We're not going to be there until the end of the year, and it is okay. And it's messy, and we're not going to like it, and it's uncomfortable. But that's what we're focused on. And
If
this
you
year,
set easy goals, you wouldn't be growing, right?
that's right. And that is the one thing that those lofty goals is what's helped us move forward. And this year, our lofty goals really center around small group instruction because we've made it to where we are right now as far as the academic goals. But we know for us to really keep moving and growing is we're going to have to personalize learning even deeper for our students based on what they need. And so this year, that's what our learning walks look like is I involve different members from our ILT and our CLT, and it's only 2 because it's really hard to take them all at one time. And we do a slice of the school, and we look at every single classroom, one classroom from every single grade level to see where we are. Right after that, we we look at the data because we do collect the data based on those indicators. And then together we co-construct the feedback that's going out to the site. So it's not just coming from me, it's coming from their peers and different teacher leaders for us to continue to grow. That has been a common practice, and I would say probably one of the highest leverage practices for us from the very beginning. But the key has been involving my teacher leaders.
I love it. Talk to me a little bit about the assessment practices at Conway. What do students do to demonstrate their own growth? You talked about setting goals, you talked about feedback, but what are the assessment structures that you're leveraging to know if students are on that path to mastery and growth?
Right. Well, as a district, we do use iReady, which is an adapted test that measures reading and math. We take that 3 times a year, and students do set goals around that. School-wide, we also set goals, and this year it's a pretty lofty goal. Our goal is that 60% of our classrooms are going to meet their growth goals mid-year, and so that's their typical growth in January,
Okay.
not at the end of the year. Our other goal is that 60% of our students are going to meet their stretch growth by the end of the year, because that's the only way that we are going to make all that catch-up growth that we need to make. And those were pretty lofty goals for us. So we do look at that and we measure that 3 times, actually 2 times a year, because we set them in the fall. We will have another kind of look at it in the winter time, and then at the end of the year, we take a look at that as well. That's also been a really great indicator for us to let us know how are we going to do on the state assessments and are we on the right track. By mid-year, it allows us to see if we need to pivot to a different area. If we notice, oh, this is what the data is telling us right now, what are we missing? So those are some assessments. Obviously, with our curriculum, we have mid-modules and end-module assessments, but the teachers also have a common practice of checking for an understanding within their classroom, and they have different structures in place to see where the kids are, and that's just a common practice. We focused on that, I want to say it was like year 3, where we really spoke about how are you checking for understanding? How are you providing time for that debrief that is so important at the very end of lessons for us, and being very intentional around that. But my favorite way of assessment is through the students. So we hold student-led conferences here twice a year. Mm-hmm. When you think of student-led conferences, and I've been at sites in the past where they have student-led conferences, but I will say that I believe at Conway, they look different and they're very authentic. Our students are invested in really setting those goals based on where they are and being okay where they are, but setting those those personalized goals for themselves, because they know that they're the ones that are going to be held accountable for sharing it to not just their parents or whoever they invite to their conferences. Sometimes it could be me. Sometimes it's guests that come to visit our site, and our students can go through their entire portfolio and share their progress of learning. They're also very reflective if they haven't met a goal, as far as identifying what are those steps that they're going to have to take to really meet that goal. So that's where that intrinsic motivation starts to come in for our students, is because those conferences are huge for us. And I can tell you that 99% of our families attend our student-led conferences.
I love it because the students are taking ownership and having been had the opportunity to be part of your student-led conferences. They are very cool. Each student, you're right, has their own goals. They have their portfolio. They're talking about their iReady scores. So those aren't just, data points that teachers are using, students are using, but also they're talking about their projects. They're able to articulate how they've grown in many other skills and talk about their next steps. And just having the opportunity to be able to articulate demonstrates their effective communication as well. It's really cool to see.
That's great. And it's been great to have you here. The one thing I do want to say with student-led conferences, that took us a good 2 to 3 years of really working through what that looks like for us. Because as I said, I've seen student-led conferences, what they could feel like, mainly at the middle level, those ages. And so when I charged our kinder team that they were going to hold student-led conferences, they initially looked at me like, oh my gosh, she is like nuts. Like, she thinks that we're middle school. Their student-led conferences are incredible. And the structure that they ended up, they became very innovative in how they were going to do it. They do it in a group where all their kids are actually leading their conference at the same time, and all the parents are there, and they have their own little stations, and then the teacher circulates around, and the kids are doing it. It is the most amazing thing to experience.
I love
But I
that.
will say, student-led conferences take time, and there has to be grace in that process of, okay, this worked, this didn't work. But the biggest thing that we've learned is that it has to be cohesive, because students can't relearn every single year what that process looks like. So we have these, again, structures that
Mhm.
are in place, as far as these are some of the components of a student-led conference that have to be there. And they just go deeper and deeper every year as our students start from TK, which there's a ton of support, right? And then how it grows by the time that they get to 6th grade, where a student will actually go through a passage presentation before they move on to 7th grade. And they can do that completely independent, and they are really demonstrating that they are ready to go to 7th grade by the time they leave their passage presentation.
I love that. So I'm wondering, all this experience at Conway, you've done an incredible job, but more importantly, like you said, your teachers and students are thriving. What advice would you give to other educational leaders who are thinking about shifting the model of their school and creating more learner-centered practices?
You have to give yourself grace. Really listen to your staff, as far as what do they see, what is their vision as far as changing the way that learning has happened. That is the one thing. Conway's been here since 1966, and I have a very veteran staff, and they were working so hard. And coming in that first year, when I looked at their test scores, because I am very data driven, and I recognized that they were all working way too hard, so much harder than the students. And
Mhm.
so what is it that you have to do to really shift, where students should be working a lot harder than our teachers? And so how do we build teacher capacity around that, and being okay with the discomfort and the messiness that happens? And I keep going back to that messiness, because I was a teacher. I'm a teacher first. We don't like that disorder.
Nope.
We want to know that here's our lesson plans. This is how my week is planned out, and this is how it needs to go. It is okay when it doesn't.
And
And
that's how learning is messy, right? Learning happens on, different paths for all young people and the teachers alike.
yes. And so I think that is really the biggest advice, is that it is okay for it to be messy, as long as you have a really solid vision of what it is that you are trying to create, and then starting to create create those benchmarks for yourself as far as what are our goals for this year, and that's it. We might have these goals later on, but you have to just stay focused to what that looks like for every single year, and then continue to build. But you always have to circle back to those initial, like this year, we had to circle back to learning targets. As I was walking into classrooms, like, oh, what's happening here? We do a really quick little mini PD around this is what it looks like, because you always have to continue to circle back to those areas. And the only way you know is by being in classrooms.
Love it. All right, we're going to switch gears to rapid fire.
Oh,
What is one thing we should stop doing in education?
talking too much. Teach adults talking too much.
Yep. What's one thing we should start doing?
Allowing our students' voices to be heard.
Love it. What should we keep doing?
Supporting our teachers and building their capacity.
Great. What's one thing you are personally focusing on learning right now?
Oh, there's so much every day. I learn so much. I'm constantly learning how I can continually be the best leader I can be for my teachers and truly listen. As a principal, when you're the only administrator at a site, you often get caught up in everything that's happening, and learning how to give myself permission to stop, pause, and listen.
Love that. What's one thing that many people don't know about you?
This is funny. I applied to the Amazing Race and was finalist for that
Wow, impressive.
a long time ago.
Do you have a favorite quote or saying that guides you?
Success is helping others succeed.
Love that. What's one thing you're grateful for right now?
My family.
And we'll close out with your hope for the future of education.
My hope is that we truly can empower our students, our learners, to achieve more than they think possible by really honoring what they're coming to us and allowing them to learn, and us getting out of the way.
Love it. Tina, thank you. This has been awesome. Thank you for sharing about Conway and helping us kind of get a peek into the journey that's really created an amazing opportunity for lots of young people.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. It was such an honor to be here with you.